Hello everyone, I'm Master Gigafo, and today we're going to be rounding off the madness at the Darkmoon Faire card reviews with the neutral cards. Now there's a wide variety of archetypes represented in all of these neutral cards, so I'm going to try to be brief with their applications, and we'll just get right into it. Okay, first off is Safety Inspector. This one's a pretty good card. It'll be used in decks that want to be drawing heavier cards, such as control and combo decks, namely Cthun Rogue and maybe some priest decks. But in other decks, it's bad to shuffle your lowest cost card. So this pretty much is relegated to slower control decks that want to kind of rework their hand. Next up is Costumed Entertainer. I don't think this one will see any play because its effect is kind of minor and niche. And here we have Horrendous Growth, which is a pretty interesting card, and it'll only see play in Yashraj decks pretty much. And an important thing to note is that getting this off of Yashraj will mean that you get the version that you played earlier, which means if you buff this up to a 6/6 by corrupting it 4 times, you'll get the 6/6 version back from Yashraj. And here we have Parade Leader. This one's pretty much relegated to Rush Warrior, and I don't think that deck will be successful. Then we have Prize Vendor. It's a Murloc, so it'll be run in Murloc decks if those become a thing. It might be used in decks that just really need card draw, because it's a good body, and it draws a card for you, and your opponent drawing a card isn't that much of a downside. It can also be used in some sort of mill deck, maybe in Warlock, but that application is a bit fringe. And here we have Rock Rager, obviously not meant to be played. It's a base stat minion with taunt. It's not very good. It has 1 health. It's just not viable and constructed. And here we have Showstopper. This one is very cool, I think, but I don't really know where to put it. Its effect is very impactful. It might be worth consideration in Highlander decks and some control decks. I've seen that this card is rated fairly highly by the community, but I don't really know about its strength. It just seems like the symmetrical effect seems kind of counterintuitive for this card, but in decks that don't really play minions in the early game, this might be a consideration. And here we have Wriggling Horror. This one's an easy inclusion into any fast tempo deck that wants to get onto the board and stick on the board. It's a tiny Fungalmancer, in a sense. Here we have Banana Vendor. This one is probably just going to be a meme relegated only to joke decks, but it could see play in a potential mill Warlock deck, but the chances of that happening are fairly slim. And then there's Darkmoon Dirigible. I don't think this one is worth it to put into corrupt decks merely because there are better options. I mean, it's pretty flexible, but I don't know. This one just kind of seems underpowered. It seems too fair to be put into constructed. And here we have Darkmoon Statue. It basically suffers from the same problem as Darkmoon Dirigible. It's a fair and balanced card, but in constructed, you need to be a bit more than fair and balanced to make the cut. Here we have Gyreworm, a pretty easy inclusion into most elemental decks. It's great utility, and its damage can go face, so that's always a plus. And it's just a generally good card that can be used with elementals. And here we have Inconspicuous Rider, I think one of the better neutral cards in the set. It goes into Secret Hunter and Secret Mage. It's basically Mad Scientist, but instead of a death rattle, it's a battle cry, and that trade-off is pretty good. And here we have Kefir Ritualist. While its stats are pretty good, I don't think there's any demand for a 3-mana 4/4 taunt in this meta. And its drawback is fairly significant, because you give your opponent an answer to your card, pretty much, on curve. And here we have Circus Amalgam. This card is going to be great for Nzoth decks that are missing maybe 1 or 2 spots for the minion type pool, and it's a base stat minion with taunt, so it's acceptable to resurrect. And here we have Circus Medic. Now, I've heard murmurs about this card and it being used in some sort of OTK shaman deck where you double Yashraj's battle cry and Circus Medic your opponent to death, but that deck seems kind of fringe and not really competitive. Here we have Fantastic Firebird. It just misses the cut for Elemental Shaman because it provides no utility. While it is a straight up improvement on other cards with Wind Fury that were printed in the past, it still just misses the cut because it doesn't provide any utility to Elemental decks. And here we have Knife Vendor, a very aggressive inclusion into your deck, and some decks might actually want this to get that last bit of face damage in to your enemy hero. But other than that, this card is not going to see play other than in super highly focused face decks. Next we have Derailed Coaster. This kind of is in the same boat as Parade Leader. Its application is very narrow with having 1/1 rushes, but the thing about this card is it depends on minions in your hand, which decks that might actually want a full board of 1/1 rushes sometimes can't achieve the number of minions in hand to make this card work. So this one misses the cut for control decks. And Rush Warrior does want this card, but Rush Warrior isn't going to be good anyway. Here we have Fleethoof Pearl Tusk, and it's pretty much an auto-include into any corrupt deck, and is a consideration for Nzoth Resurrection. Here we have Optimistic Ogre, a cute nod to other ogres in the past, and it's different text. This one is just pack filler, pretty much. Here we have Claw Machine. This one is great for Nzoth, and might even be good enough to run in other control decks because it's deal 6 draw and buff the minion. It's all-round good card, but as I said before, I don't know if an all-round good card is good enough to run in a deck that it doesn't synergize with, so this one's a bit up in the air for me. And here we have Sylas Darkmoon. We all got this card, and we're able to play with it for a while, so we all know how it plays, how it feels. I think this one is better than people give it credit for. Its effect is very powerful, very swingy, and less situational than you might think. And with combos with other cards, this card's efficiency goes through the roof. Here we have Strongman, another auto-include into every corrupt deck, and this one's especially powerful because a 0 mana 6/6 taunt after playing a big card is a great payoff. Here we have Carnival Clown. I have hope for this card. A lot of people say it's too slow, it can't be used in these corrupt decks, but I think differently. I think that playing this in maybe some sort of super greedy old god deck could actually warrant Carnival Clown's inclusion. So I wouldn't entirely count out Carnival Clown yet. And here we start with the first old god, Cthun the Shattered. This card is great in Shuffle Rogue, and it's probably going to see play in Warrior as well, just because of their control nature. I think this card is one of the better old gods, just because it can be put into kind of any control deck, and isn't really that big of a burden. It's one card that provides a win condition for pretty much any deck. I wouldn't be surprised if this sees play in a lot of different archetypes. And here we have Darkmoon Rabbit. I tried to make a Deck of Chaos deck. I tried to theory craft one, with Darkmoon Rabbit in it, but it just ended up being disappointing and sad. Darkmoon Rabbit, I don't think has any other application. While it is true that it's good off of Nzoth resurrections, I just think that it's too slow to be used in that way. And speaking of Nzoth, he himself, Nzoth, the god of the deep, I think this is the worst old god, merely because his effect is the least significant. It's a one-time board sweep, and that's it. You're gonna see this in Warrior, most likely, and maybe Paladin, and maybe even Druid, but anywhere else it's really hard to pull off. And here we have Yashraj the Defiler. This one is a great card, and creates corrupt decks and makes them actually viable. It takes everything good about Nzoth and makes it less restrictive. Using corrupt cards isn't as restrictive as using a menagerie theme, in my opinion. And last but certainly not least is Yoggsaron, Master of Fate. This one can be thrown into pretty much any deck that's slower than aggro. Does your mid-range deck need a 30th card? Put in Yoggsaron. If it has enough spells, it'll work out. Control deck? Yoggsaron. Combo deck? Yoggsaron. Why not? Maybe even an aggro spell deck. I don't know. Yoggsaron. It's a good card. Just put it in there. This one is amazing, and probably one of the best cards in the set. And that is gonna do it for every single card in Madness at the Darkmoon Faire. The expansion releases tomorrow as of recording this, and I am so excited. I cannot wait to try out all of these new cards, all of these new archetypes, and discover more as time goes on. If you like what you see, consider subscribing. It helps out the channel more than you would think, and it gets more people to see this little community that we've made together. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.